Just going to replace the front shock absorbers on this Mark II Audi TT. We've got the wheel off. Now we're just going to remove these two T25s. They fit nicely in the honeycomb. Keep them there for storage. Then you can carefully lift this up and access the 3 bolts that hold the top of the strut top hat in place. Be careful though, this one's already been broken here. But if you're careful, you should be able to do that without breaking it. There's actually no screws, the T25s, in the other side. Next thing I'm going to do is remove the drop link. That's that bolt and nut there from both sides. If you have trouble with that thread spinning inside the ball joint, you might need to add the triple square to hold that shaft and then remove the nut. And that is a 6mm triple square. You'll also notice this is the right side of the car, and this drop link goes to the rear of the strut there. Let's go and have a look at the left hand side of the car. So around on the left hand side of the car, we've got the drop link there, and it's actually going to the front side of the strut. And here you can see one reason why I need to remove the struts is to replace those boots, but I am also doing the shock absorbers. And once you've got that nut off, you can swing that out of the way. So what we've got here is, this is the knuckle, so where all of the wheel bearing and wheel assembly and brakes connect to, and that is clamped onto the tube of the shock absorber with this bolt here. And there's a slit down the back we can just see here. So we need to remove this bolt and then spread this slit so that the shock absorber can slide out of the knuckle. On this car, that nut is 18mm and the head of the bolt is 14mm triple square. Just going to get this bracket out of the way that holds the speed sensor and the fluid pipe for the brakes on. It's just a 10mm bolt. Instead of removing drive shafts, lower ball joints and all sorts of stuff, I wanted to come up with a simpler way of doing this. So the knuckle is here, and we need to hold the strut in place and slide the knuckle off the bottom of the strut. So I've just got this block of wood in here. I have cut an angle on it, 15 degrees, and then I'm just using this house lifting jack. I've made a little spacer up here, which has got a couple of screws in it so it can't slip off in this direction. And then I've modified a socket so that I can fit it into this square because it is an odd size and I don't have the proper tool for it, but this is perfect because now I can use my rattle gun on here. So you can see that working really well. It's definitely coming out of here. I have given this some WD-40 spray, so it's not going to be too tight. It's just pushing this down. I think that's going to be okay, but it might get to the point where it's going to be a bit hard to get the strut out. So I'm going to see if I can take a bit of spring pressure off with a spring clamp. See if that helps us as well. Okay, so that's worked pretty well. I've got a spring compressor holding the spring together. It's not the best. Can't have it between two coils. I've got it on the bottom perch, so it's not great, but it's going to be okay. And I've loosened the top 3 bolts now, so this is all floating. So now, as I extend this down, we should be able to get the strut out without too much issue. Let's see how we go. There we go, we're out. No problem. one strut removed. This is the spacer that I made up. So this fits up through these two bolts here, or slots I should say, and it just makes that gap so that I've got this nice and flat across here, and that is for my jack to sit into the top of there. So there we can see the jack in position there. So the idea of that spacer is to just take up this space so that the jack is pushing up evenly on there. And obviously the stud's going through so it can't flick out is obviously another consideration. So leave the bolts in the top to hold that up, and then we're going to open the jack up, and then that's going to push the knuckle down. Just trying to capture this because it just works so well. So it's just about to come out now of the knuckle. You can see where the WD-40 has gone down nicely. We can remove that top bolt. That's the last one holding the strut in. So this one I didn't bother putting the extra clamp, the spring clamp on, and it looks like I'm going to be able to get it out. Gonna have to put the camera down there. Now the other thing worth noting here is there's actually two arrows here. So these are going towards the outside of the car. This is the inside of the car, so you can see the part down here that goes in between the knuckle. So these arrows are sort of forward and reverse direction and towards the outside of the car here. So we just need to make sure when we get that back together again, we do it the same way. Let's just clean up those threads. Get some WD on there. Now we can put a spring clamp on, take that strut top off and rebuild that strut top. I only have one of this type of spring compressor, so it should be two. You should have one on both sides, but this works fine. That'll do, and if it's not enough, I can always put another one on the other side of a different style that I do have. But now we're gonna see if we can crack the top hat nut. This is just 21 mil. Not sure if I'm gonna have to hold the shaft, but we'll give it a go. And we got that off. Okay, once we've got that off, we can see that this can just come apart. Obviously, we got not ideal. It's always better to have two clamps, but we can get this top off. And there inside we can see the bump stop as well. Need to make sure we put the bump stop back in place on the new strut. The main reason I don't like using this type is that you have to screw it with a spanner, and it's a very odd size as well, so just extremely slow. These ones definitely much better design. Anyway, it's done the job, and we can pull that off now and get the new strut up, ready to fit out. When you get to this point here, you want to make a really good comparison to make sure that you've got the right ones. And I'm happy, everything looks really good here. You can see a slightly different design where my special tool actually fitted up across these two. This one only has a single hole, so my special tool's not going to work on that one. That's a bit of a pain. Other than that, the reason that I'm replacing these is there was a very small weep. Even though I cleaned it up and I haven't really seen any oil return, you can see, there you go, a little tiny bit of oil. And also when you push it down, it stays down, it doesn't rebound. So that's the sign of a bad shock absorber as well. So here's a new one. If we push that down, which is also difficult to do, push it down, instantly comes straight back up. So you got bump and rebound control So this is the top hat. It is a bearing though. That spring and the top hat need to be able to rotate. So you can see what they do wear out. These ones actually feel fine. So I'm just going to pull it apart, clean it all out, and reapply some new grease. So these are just a push fit. A lot of rubber on here. So you just need to get between here, these two surfaces, or this connection point. Just gently lever that up, and there is the actual bearing itself. So this is what we're going to pull apart and clean out. It's pretty good, but as you can see, a lot of grit around it as well, so it's a good opportunity to give it all a good clean. So yeah, we'll just proceed with cleaning this up and repacking it with some new grease after it's all nice and clean. The next step here is just to pull this top, which is a cover, and I think we can just carefully go around here. There are clips, plastic clips that hold that on, but if you're careful, they come off really nicely. And there is our race of ball bearings, and we want to make sure we don't lose any ball bearings as well. So I'm actually going to remove all of these, clean all of that, and re-grease it. So let's make sure we don't lose any of these ball bearings. The best way to do this is to use a magnet. And now we can go ahead and clean all of this up. I'll probably take it to the parts washer, and once it's all clean, reassemble it with some new grease. So looking at these parts, they're in excellent condition. So I'm very happy just to be able to clean them up and reassemble it with some high pressure grease. This is just some old Valvoline Valveplex extreme pressure grease. So I'm just going to use that for repacking the bearing. And what we want to do is just get enough grease in there to hold the balls, and then once the balls are in, I'll probably just try and go over the top of them. This is the bottom race, so we'll just go ahead, put a little bit of grease in just in the very bottom of the V of that one as well. Okay, I reckon that's okay. They can now go together. So this goes on top that way, and then we should have a nice bearing surface. Beautiful. So now this can clip on top. I'll just give this a bit of a wipe and we'll put this back together. These two can go back together. On with our bump stop, that just clips in there. Then the new boot, so this has a tapered end on it, actually goes into here, and it will clip into this bearing as well. You can rotate it, push it at the same time. Okay, so that's all ready now to go onto the new strut. Now this is where I discovered another problem. So this plastic cap clips into the boot. So this actually kind of clips in and all, it gets held together there. The problem is, fits on the old shock absorber, but because of this design with this ring, it doesn't fit onto the new shock absorber. I've had a good look and there's no way that I can get that to fit. The sizes are just too different for these diameters. So unfortunately I'm gonna have to leave that off. The good thing though is when you do put this all together, this does kind of fit over where you have to push it over that ring. So it's kind of doing the same thing as that plastic ring used to do, except that it's metal. So it's okay, it will be fine, but just a little bit disappointing. So we can pull this off now and get the spring back in place. Let's give these surfaces a bit of a wipe. A lot of cars, there'll be rubber rings on these, or like a rubber gasket kind of thing, insulating. It doesn't appear that these have them. New nuts come with the struts, unless they fall out of the box in delivery. These ones aren't actually lock nuts either, which is also interesting, wherein the factory ones are a nylock. And they're a different size. Great. Seeing as I have one missing from the other side anyway, I'm going to make these both the same, and I'm going to reuse the old ones. And the nylock is still working well, so that's a good thing. We can release the springs, making sure the end of the spring is in the low point of the seat. Top end doesn't matter because it's a bearing, so we can release these and we're ready to refit. So just to recap there, once you get your strut in position, you will need to get it up in the top here first. You kind of need to get it started in that well. Then get your strut started in your top of your knuckle. Then once you've done that, lift the whole lot up and get at least one of the top bolts in. And then it's going to hold itself up. So then you can get a jack underneath the lower wishbone and just lift the knuckle up and it'll just slide up. Make sure it's nicely aligned and it'll just slide up over the foot of the bottom of the strut. And then just put everything back together again. So here's the couple of tools that I made. This just goes up underneath the strut there. I've named it for next time. Hopefully I don't forget what that's for. Again with this one as well, the little jack sat on top of that, giving it a name. So 15 degrees is actually where I cut that at, so that angle worked out perfectly for that little jack to get it nice and level on the bottom of the spring seat. Now I just got to put these somewhere where I don't forget them.